Just in terms of what you could expect to feel, especially if you're shooting suppressed, 100%. I mean, the gun's a tack driver anyways, but when you add this, I feel like you add this to any AR-15, especially a premium gun, you're gonna have a big difference, but especially when you suppress it. I mean, I felt you could see the difference.
You could feel it, see it, everything.
What's going on, everybody? Aaron down here at Shoot Center in Southwest Florida. We're currently in Cape Coral, and I'm sitting here with...
My name's Troy Eichenrode. I'm our training director.
John Shore, assistant instructor.
And
Assistant Instructor Extraordinaire.
Yeah, right.
Okay, that's the proper title.
I appreciate that.
All right, so we're talking about bolt carrier groups today, and you know, for a long time, people have been arguing about what the best bolt carrier group is for their AR-15. Very, very common for people to upgrade their bolt carrier group, right, to get better reliability, perhaps durability out of their firearm. But why do you guys think a bolt carrier group is even that important?
Well, this is the heart of the gun. I mean, for any AR, the bolt carrier, this does the job, right? But this has the most strain on it, the most pressures, the heat, everything from that round that goes off, right? So this is actually a super critical, important part.
Mm-hmm.
It's the heart of the system, of course, and without that system, you would just have a gun and bullets, right? So the whole entire system runs off of this bolt carrier group system. So if you have a piece of crap bolt carrier system,
Right.
the gun's not going to run, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so without this, you just have a gun and bullets. It'd be like having what? Like a bowl of Cheerios and no milk.
Exactly.
Right?
Oof.
Right?
Oof.
My thing is this, you know, the bolt carrier group is involved in multiple things, right? You know, not so much feeding, but feeding is occurring as the bolt carrier comes forward and that bolt face strips the round off the top of the magazine, right? So it's involved in feeding, chambering, locking, firing, unlocking, extracting, ejecting, and even as it moves rearward, it's cocking the hammer, right?
Yeah.
So it's involved in every single step of the process. So it's really important that this is the absolute best bolt carrier group that you can find if reliability matters, if durability really matters. How much it matters to you? Well, it just all depends on what you're gonna use the gun for. Me personally, if I'm gonna make a recommendation or risk my life or put extreme confidence in something like a bolt carrier group, for me, it's because I want to control every single variable possible, right? I can't control what the bad guy's going to do or when the bad guy's going to try and hurt me. I can't control when I might have to deploy my firearm, but what I can control is my own individual level of training. That's my capability to use that firearm under stress, but also the firearm's ability to perform under stress. And quite frankly, the bolt carrier group is the #1 most stressed component, right? And it's also where you see a lot of failures. So we're talking about today the difference between the Extreme Defense bolt carrier group, which is a project I've had my eye on now for over 5 years. I've been somewhat involved in this from the beginning, compared to a regular AR-15 bolt carrier group. We're going to talk about a few things here in detail in the next couple of minutes. All right, so just visually, visually looking at these, you guys are going to be able to see that the coating is different. John, what's different about the coating from this one to this one?
Difference in the coating is this is like a phosphate. The regular bolt carrier group is a phosphate. The one on the Extreme Defense is a PVD with a little bit of, what do you say, secret sauce?
Secret sauce, right? You got to have a little secret sauce,
Right.
not too much, not too little.
Exactly. So it gives it a high lubricity properties to it, less friction. All right. So they say with the regular bolt carrier group, carbon buildup on it sticks to it. This somewhat sticks to it, but not as bad as it does with the regular bolt carrier group. So it's easier to clean, which means easier maintenance wise.
Yeah, yeah.
Also with the bolt carrier group, you have the surfaces are not rounded, it's more flat. All right, so why is it flat?
All right. Why is the Earth flat?
I don't know. But it has reduced mass, which produces less, how do you say, backward pressure
Yeah.
to it. All right.
Yeah, less mass. I mean, you don't want to have any more mass in there than is needed because we want to try to optimize. It's an energy system. It's a closed system. We want to try to optimize it. Where you want to have mass is in areas of key stress, and we're going to talk about that more in a second. The one thing that people will compare this to is a nickel boron, and nickel boron has become, one of the standards in the industry. What's interesting is the coefficient of friction between the PVD, the physical vapor deposition, and a nickel boron is very, very similar. A key difference, though, is that molecularly, nickel boron has a tendency, and this is just something that's been observed through testing, has a tendency to bond with carbon more so than a PVD. So while the lubricity might be the same, the problem is when you put carbon, you add carbon into this closed system, the PVD maintains that friction coefficient more so than the nickel boron does. All right, so I think it's probably time that we test this thing out a little bit more and do some shooting.
Yeah, let's do that.
So what do you guys want to do?
Yeah, well, let's get the guns up. Mag might be helpful. Huge difference. Not just in the gas, but also just recoil. You can feel it instantly. Yeah. You can feel it instantly. That's pretty cool. So the actual shape of this, right? So if we look at these, some of the big key features that we have, obviously when you guys look at it, you'll see it's not as round as before. It's to take away the mass, help with some of that movement. But you'll see that there are a lot of linear cuts in the bolt and bolt carrier itself to help with feeding and reliability, okay? You'll see also key features like the gas key. The gas key is shortened versus a regular one. That's to help with movement. You can get it going, moving a little bit further back, which helps with that recoil. The more movement in the buffer system, more energy is absorbed. You'll also see on the back of the very tail end of the bolt itself, the rails are extended all the way there. Help with that bolt tilt, right? As that bolt comes rear, we have a tendency to see that tilt, which adds with recoil.
Carrier tilt, right? We want to try to make things as consistent as possible because we all know when it comes to shooting, when it comes to accuracy, it's all about making the shooter as consistent as possible, and that's always the key variable. But when it comes to the equipment, we want that to be as consistent as we can too, so that's like a known variable. So when you have, differences in the back of the carrier itself, essentially what this does is it reduces the chance for carrier tilt, all right? And that carrier tilt basically throws off the force lines that you would normally experience as the shooter absorbs the recoil. And then as Troy mentioned, the gas key is shorter, and so what that does is compared to a traditional gas key, it allows the carrier to literally travel further back into the receiver extension and be absorbed even more by that buffer spring. So you get a little bit more, I believe with their system, the spring, they give you a spring, it's a little bit more resistivity in that spring, right? So more travel, more resistivity in the spring allows for softer shooting or softer feel, so less recoil essentially, right? So that's a key difference. What else we got? We got the bolt. The bolt, there's some real obvious differences here from a traditional bolt to the Extreme Defense bolt. Now, in the Extreme Defense bolt, what's the first thing you noticed, John? Real similar to a Knight's bolt, right?
I noticed that the lugs on the front end are rounded,
Right.
which the typical AR-15, they're kind of squared off, which that creates friction. When it's rounded, it has the PVD coating on it, it actually makes it a little bit slicker. So less friction means
Less friction points.
less friction points, right?
Right. Yeah. What else is a big one that you notice right away if you look at the bolt face?
It has
on the
double
Extreme
ejectors
Defense? Yep.
on it, which aids in reliability of extracting that round or pushing that round out.
Right.
Also you have on the bolt, you have more mass in the back end of it compared to the traditional one. So that aids in reliability as well.
Stronger.
Way stronger.
Less chance of fracturing. The bolt's under an extreme amount of pressure, right? Because the bolt is literally what blocks the breech. So as it's locked in place, the bolt is literally what is pushing all of that energy forward and out the end of the bolt. And additionally, as it locks and unlocks under high speed, these bolt lugs are under a tremendous amount of stress. So the more that you can reduce the friction areas, the less stress is going to be on the bolt, and the less chance of any sort of a fracture occurring. And fractures are going to occur in your bolts. I've seen them happen with, issue Colt bolts, and as few as 10,000 rounds. And in speaking with the guys over at Extreme Defense this morning, they have bolts there that are 45,000 round count with no fractures that have occurred. Now let's talk about the alloys that are used, because we jumped right into the coating because that's the obvious difference. But what about the alloys specifically? I think again we're getting into the secret sauce.
Yeah, a little bit of proprietary stuff. It's an aerospace alloy. Both the bolt and bolt carrier group, everything is.
And that's important because we have Space Force, and so we're already thinking about that, right?
We're trying to get up. Hey, we're trying to take over that moon, right? Put a base up there.
Sign up.
Right. Get you a waiver.
Yeah, we can get you a waiver. Come on now. But yeah, this is an aerospace alloy. They don't give us a whole lot of information there, just proprietary reasons, which is perfectly fine. But it's a high grain, really high strength refined grain, which means it takes a lot of the impurities out of it. Better strength, better reliability there.
So what does that mean, refined grain? Well, you have those atoms basically bonding and moving all in the same direction and as pure as possible. So the purer this is an alloy, the less chance of any sort of failure occurring in the bonds, basically, right, under stress.
Now, one of the nice things about kind of going back to PVD, the coatings are put at a low temp, which doesn't mess with the metallurgy of the bolt. Some coatings out there can. So that's something really nice that both of them have.
That's key when you talk about the temperature required for some of the coatings, 800 degrees. Well, I mean that absolutely changes the temperament of the alloy, and that's something that not a lot of people thought about. A lot of coaters out there were coating AR-15 parts, and this really started years and years and years ago. But they didn't really understand a lot of the stuff. They just started they knew coatings, but didn't really know anything about how AR-15s functioned. So that's an important note. And the extractor on the bolt, what's different about the extractor?
So same alloy that's used in the bolt and bolt carrier group is there, but it's the heat temperature is changed. It's a higher heat temp. So it's a little bit stronger.
So it's different. It is a different. I don't remember if it was higher or lower, but it's treated differently because it's been recognized that the extractor is under a key type of stress, and so it's not treated the same way as the rest of the bolt. Another thing about the bolt, if a close up you'll be able to see, but there's actually along the bolt face the rim of the cartridge, seats inside the bolt face and is under pressure from the ejector rod, right? And it's held in place by the extractor. In this case, a double extractor. Well, if you would see that casing seated on the bolt face, and you were to look around the rim of the bolt, there's more mass on the Extreme Defense bolt than there is on a standard bolt. Why is that important? Well, again, you want to have more mass in key areas that are under stress as opposed to just a more massive bolt overall, right? Because the key is efficiency.
She's gassy. That's crazy. I want one.
Like it's a total difference. Total difference.
As a shooter, there's one key thing here that you're really going to notice, especially if you're shooting suppressed. And so for all the guys out there that like to buy nice stuff for their guns and like to buy, especially the best stuff for their guns because they're shooting suppressed, Extreme Defense is something you got to check out. So Troy, what do we really have? It's hard to really explain the differences in the engineering, but what is the effect?
So essentially it has to do with the cam pin and how far the cam pin moves and the bolt moves itself. But essentially there's a little bit of a delay that they don't, it's tough to say, around 10% on time wise. It's very difficult to say here, but essentially there's a little bit of delay before the gun unlocks, right? And same thing when it locks back up. So there's a little bit longer of a total shot process. Mm-hmm. So take your normal gun, it goes bang, the bolt moves, unlocks, extracts, and comes back. That gas starts to vent. Hence why suppressed shooters get a lot of gas in the face. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a little bit of a time delay essentially before that gun unlocks all the way and moves, so that gas has more time to vent down the barrel instead of back down the chamber. Right. So that's really the big thing, the secret sauce to this.
Yeah, and so imagine if when you fired the gun, your bolt carrier group didn't move at all. That's comparable to, say, just a bolt action rifle, right? Mm-hmm. Where you would have to manually cycle the bolts. You'd have to manually unlock it, extract, eject, and then return everything forward, right, to complete the cycle. But unfortunately, we can't have that, and in a perfect world, we would direct all that energy out the bore, and none of that energy would come back on the shooter. But we're actually using that energy to cycle the gun, and because the gun has moving parts, well, you're going to feel those parts as they move, okay? So this is all about reducing the amount of energy required to cycle the gun, even under extreme circumstances, which in my opinion, if you're not buying components for your gun that survive under extreme circumstances, I don't really see what the point is, personally. All right, so the truth is, guys, we're not going to be able to go over every single detail. And to be honest, there's still things about this bolt carrier group that I'm noticing, and I've had this in my gun for a few months now. So, but one thing we haven't hit on is something pretty major in terms of design that's truly different than anything else out there, and that is the bolt cam path. And essentially what we have is a softer feel, because as the gun unlocks and also as it goes into battery, there's less of an abrupt movement, so it's softer. So essentially, if you were to look at your bolt carrier group, is the rotating bolt, right? So that's the way that this locks and unlocks, as it rotates in and rotates out of place. And the way that happens is via this cam path, okay, that's on the front of the, you can see it on the top of the carrier. Well, on a standard carrier, the path is a little bit steeper. Think of it like a hill to climb, whereas with the Extreme Defense carrier, the path is different, okay? So what that results in is a little bit longer dwell time. So after you fire the gun, everything happens super, super fast, but essentially the gun begins to unlock. Well, in a standard AR-15 bolt carrier group, the amount of time that it takes to unlock is a little bit less. So this stays locked and in battery for just a little bit longer. We were discussing earlier about 10% roughly. Yeah. And that results in arguably a more accurate gun, because we all know that a bolt gun is more accurate than a non-bolt gun. So essentially it's staying in battery just a little bit longer. Additionally, when the gun returns into battery and fully cycles, the bolt slamming into the receiver or into the barrel extension, it's a little bit softer as well, because as that bolt comes forward and compresses, again, the cam path is smoother and less of a hill to climb. So as it unlocks and rotates, and then it rotates back into the lock position, it's smoother. So reliability, better. Durability, better. Longevity, of course, right? So the life, so you're spending more money on a piece of kit like this, but you're also getting a longer life out of this piece of kit.
Oh, yeah.
And this is kind of like, I mean, it's almost like part of the engine for your vehicle, right? So, I mean, this is a really, really, really critical component. Yeah. Probably the most critical component on the gun, because if really anything about this fails, the gun is not going to function one way or another. We're going to have some kind of a failure, whether it's extraction, whether it's ejection, whether it's chambering, or whether it's just a sheared bolt lug, which is super, super common.
Yeah, I've seen that more than a time or two. With the rounded lugs, it helps prevent that a little bit. So
I always say buy once, cry once.
yeah, buy once, cry once.
Buy once, cry once. I bought many times. I've cried many times. So
Yeah, we all do that.
Been there, done that.
Yeah. Anyhow, this is the bolt carrier group from Extreme Defense. I love it. I've known these guys for a long time. I trust them. I trust the product. And again, if you're trying to control all variables possible, all right, bottom line is you want the best piece of gear in your gun, especially when it comes to such a critical component. It's not to say that gear is better than training. If you have the best gear and you can't use it, well, you in total are really not that effective, right? But if we want a gun to always work when we need it most, you're going to have to go with something like this from Extreme Defense, in my opinion. I've seen just too many failures with bolt carrier groups. And the fact that it shoots softer and is arguably more accurate, I mean, what's not to like?
It's already a win-win.
Yeah, and then also the coating. The fact that carbon doesn't really adhere to it.
It just wipes off.
It wipes off, right. So you combine that with something like Fire Clean.
Yeah.
I mean, I doubt anything's going to stick to this at all. So.
Yeah, exactly. We're all big friends of Fire Clean, so.
Yeah. Feels pretty damn nice.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie.